Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Welcome to the Thunderdome podcast. Week 13 is in the books, and we are just inching that much closer to the playoffs. Now, I forgot to ask everyone to submit me some questions. I was going to do the classic Comish's Corner this week, but I completely forgot to ask for some new questions, so I had to kind of scramble and think of something else to do for the segment today, and I thought it would be fun if I just told you guys a couple of jokes. All right, let's see here. So I went to the doctor the other day, and he told me I had to stop masturbating. And I said, "Doc, why?" And he said, "Because I'm trying to take your temperature." No, didn't like that one. Okay. My local baker was arrested for selling meth the other day, which I just thought was crazy, you know? After 5 years of being his customer, I had no idea he was a baker. Thank you. Here's a fun one. Where do terrorists go after they die? Everywhere. All right, and I'll go ahead and I'll put you out of your misery and then just do one more. So, there were these three young women who were walking down the beach, and they saw a man with no arms and no legs just laying on a beach towel. They felt bad, so they walked up to him. They walked up to talk to him, and the first girl says, "Hey, have you ever been hugged before?" And the guy just kind of looks confused, and he says, "No." And so she bends down and she gives him a hug, and then she walks away. The second girl comes up to him and says, "Okay, well, have you ever been kissed before?" And the guy kind of perks up and goes, "Well, no." And so she bends down and she gives him a kiss. And then she walks away, follows her friend and walks away. And so the third girl bends down to him and kind of just looks at him and smiles, and she says, "So you've never been hugged before and you've never been kissed before. Have you ever been fucked before?" And the guy really perks up and he goes, No, I haven't." She leans in, gets a little bit closer to him and says, "Well, you're about to be when the tide comes in."
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. All right. Please don't turn off. Please don't turn out of the video. Please don't click out. I'm sure I'd lost about half of you already, but for those of you who stuck around, I appreciate it. I promise I'm getting into the football stuff right now. So let's go ahead and do it. Cue the sound.
Football!
Here we go. Okay, so week 13 is in the books, and about 3/4 of us got our ass kicked. So my bagpipe guys are going to be very, very busy here tonight. So, fellas, go ahead and kick us off. I'm sorry, I'm going to get through this quickly. All right, let's go ahead and start with me versus Ben. Now, I did lose 152.14 to 109.66. In this time of the season when everybody really needs to win, I just keep fucking losing. And I came up with Ben, who put up the highest amount of points this week. Yeah, I'm not having a whole lot of fun here so far. I've lost 3 out of my last 4 games. And I'm putting up no points in the process. Alvin Kamara finished with just 5.7. Played no part in that game against Tampa Bay last night. Brandon Ayuk, who I just traded, I was really hoping he'd have a good game against Miami. Finished with just 9.6. That's not terrible, but Jimmy Garoppolo did pretty much break his ankle, so I'm not real looking forward to him going forward. Foster Moreau, just 1 catch for 32 yards. Thanks, Case. Appreciate that. 4.2 fantasy points. That's going to really help me out going down the stretch. And Vegas going forward, their matchups are not looking great. So if anybody wants Foster Moreau, I'm about to throw him away like I would a fucking half-eaten sub. Antonio Gibson, who I also got from Case, he finished with 7.9. He had 39 rushing yards in a 20-20 tie with the New York Giants. That's another one. I've made a grave mistake because Gibson has completely lost his first spot there in the Washington running back situation. So I continue just to fuck myself and shoot myself and shoot and fucking shoot myself to death by trying to make trades with people. It wasn't all bad, though. Deebo Samuel had 12.3. The Philly defense finished with 11. My kicker got 16. Mike White, who I might start using a little bit more down the stretch here, finished with 19.46. He was pretty good against Minnesota. His 2 interceptions hurt him a little bit, but he had 370 yards and a rushing touchdown, so it wasn't a bad day for him there. And I'm really glad I picked up Samaje Perine. I picked him up at the beginning of last week when I saw Mixon was still in concussion protocol and not really getting closer to playing, so I picked him up. He ended up starting, and he was my best guy by a mile. He finished with 23.5 fantasy points. In the grand scheme of things, that didn't mean shit because I got absolutely fucking annihilated again. Now, Ben got away with playing Deshaun Watson. I'm not quite sure why he made that decision to play him over Geno Smith, who did get 31 points on his bench against the Rams. Instead, he played Deshaun Watson, who hadn't played football in like 730 days. That's not even an exaggerated joke. That's actually how long it's been since Deshaun Watson's played football. So he had 131 yards and an interception for 5.3. I was really, really hoping a decision like that was gonna hurt Ben in the end, but it didn't matter at all because Ben put up 152 fantasy points. So Ben kind of looked out there in a kind of a weird decision like that didn't end up hurting him. Travis Kelce had a down day against Cincinnati. They ended up beating the Chiefs. He had 4 catches for 56 yards, 7.6 fantasy points. That's a really low day for Kelce. But really, other than that, it went just fine for Ben overall. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a touchdown, 13.4. Ramondre Stevenson didn't get in the end zone against Buffalo, but he still finished with 13.8. Let's see here. Tony Pollard had 2 touchdowns. Big day against Indianapolis. Fucking that Dallas defense, all they did was take the ball away from Indianapolis all game. Even when they were up 40 points, they were still forcing turnovers. God damn it. They finished with 24 thanks to 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. It was 1 pick six, 1 scoop and score, and they allowed 19 points. It was a huge day for them, and that was frustrating to watch on Sunday night. Christian McCaffrey was good and solid. He had a receiving touchdown for 28.6 fantasy points in the big win over Miami. And then Tyler Lockett, 9 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown for 29.8 fantasy points. So the only thing is that he didn't play Geno Smith, and he would have put up 180 points. So it would have made me look even fucking worse than I did. So thank you, Ben. I think you probably did it on purpose to keep me from losing by 70 something instead of the 40 that I lost by this week. So that is that for me once again. All right, someone else who got the wrath this week was Liv. Now, Liv lost to Sam 145.4 to 112.1. And big part of that was because Derrick Henry got absolutely shut down for 2 straight weeks. This time was at Philly, who they have a strong rush defense, but they've been kind of giving up points lately. But they figured it out against Derrick Henry, who had just 30 rushing yards and 5.8 fantasy points. That's a bad day for him. George Kittle, just 2 catches for 22 yards in that game against Miami. He finished with 4.2. Chase Claypool, I really liked him this week, especially because Darnell Mooney got hurt, and Claypool is kind of just the big pass catcher in that offense now. 5 catches for 28 yards and 5.8 fantasy points against Green Bay. That was a big letdown there as well. Her kicker, Nick Folk, who had been just completely lights out here all year, missed a field goal against Buffalo, went 1 for 2 with an extra point, finished with 3 fantasy points. Seattle's defense was good and solid. They finished with 2 picks and 11 fantasy points. Singletary got in the end zone for 11.1. CeeDee Lamb was solid, 5 catches, 71 yards, and a touchdown. He's been looking great lately. Justin Herbert looked pretty good, 335 and a touchdown in that loss lost to Vegas. And then DK Metcalf was monster too, just like Lockett was on the other side there. He had 8 catches, 127 yards, and a touchdown for 28.7 fantasy points. It was not a terrible week for Liv, but really got let down by Derrick Henry, George Kittle, and Claypool. Just those guys really kind of set the tone for the week there. As for Sam was the second highest scorer of the week behind Ben at 145.4. His only real duds were Hawkinson, who had 4 catches for 33 yards and 7.3. Jacoby Myers couldn't get anything going against Buffalo, 3 catches, 22 yards and 5.2. And the Washington defense, they were okay. You know, they did force a fumble, but allowed 20 points and finished with 8. But Sam had plenty of help in other areas. Brian Robinson Jr., he had 13.1 fantasy points. He's become the number 1 running back in Washington. That completely fucks me over, but we'll ignore that for right now. Younghoe Koo, 14 points. Getting that out of your kicker always means you're having a good day. David Montgomery got in the end zone, 16.7 points. Let me see here. Justin Jefferson got in the end zone yet again, 7 catches, 45 yards, 18.6 fantasy points. Tua, the 2 interceptions hurt him just a little bit, but he also threw for 295 and 2 TDs, just under 22 fantasy points there. But time and time again, it's always one of Sam's wide receivers, and this week it was Davante Adams, who was just a fucking monster. Just a fucking monster against the Chargers. 8 catches, 177 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was good for 40.7. Sam has he has debatably like 2 of the top 5 wide receivers in his core. One of them always goes off. I don't know if there's been a week where both of them have sucked. So yeah, it was a huge day for Davante Adams, and it just kind of led to Sam having a monster day and smack the shit out of Liv. All right, moving on again. Under the bagpipes here was Matt Glassmeyer, who lost 100.98 to Al's 136.64. Now, Matt had been on a tear lately, but kind of just got unlucky with a bunch of injuries this week, and just kind of some downer guys here. Hayden Hurst caught 2 catches for 12 yards, 3.6 fantasy points. 3.2 fantasy points, and also got hurt in the process too. That didn't help him at all. Who also got hurt was Kenneth Walker, who had been a monster all year. Finished with just 36 yards before he picked up an ankle injury. 3.6 fantasy points there. Baltimore's defense wasn't quite as shut down as they should have been against Denver. That game did play out to a bitchin' 10-9, but Baltimore could only muster up 7 fantasy points. Aaron Jones, who I really thought would have a better day against Chicago, could only finish with 26 rushing yards and 10 fantasy points. Same can be said for Aaron Rodgers, too, who did get the win at the end of the day, but wasn't as dominant as I thought he would be. He had 182 yards and a touchdown, just under 15 fantasy points. Jonathan Taylor, he was phased out of the game script against Dallas. They lost 54-19. He had 82 yards and 13.3. It's not a terrible day, but not a great one by any means. It did get a little bit better though with Christian Kirk, who caught 6 catches for 104 yards and 18.4 fantasy points. And then Keenan Allen kind of capped off Matt's week with 20.8 points, thanks to 6 catches, 88 yards, and a score. That was kind of vintage Keenan Allen that Matt's probably been waiting for all season long. But yeah, it all played out. It just tons of injuries, low scoring. It just didn't play out very well for Matt, who finished just under 101 fantasy points. Who had a much better week was Al, despite playing Njoku while he's been out since Friday. I understand Al has been sick, but he kind of got away with playing Njoku, who was always ruled out going into this game. That shouldn't have been a surprise, but he won't care because it didn't matter. Got lucky too because Lamar Jackson missed the entire second half against the Broncos with a knee injury. Finished with just 11 yards and 1.34 fantasy points. It's crazy to get that out of your QB and to still win by 36 fantasy points. And the reason that happened is because of guys like Austin Eckler, who finished with 13.2, didn't get in the end zone, and he fumbled, but still got into the double digits. Just tons of workload for him, especially in the air. Chris Godwin, 14.3, 8 catches, 63 yards. Then you got, San Francisco defense had 3 picks, a fumble, and a score for 22 points against Miami. Devontae Smith, 23.2. There's a big reason why I was trying to trade Al for him this week, because I loved him this week. He had 5 catches, 102 yards, and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs, once again, has just been the man. He's now leading the league in rushing yards. 144 yards, touchdown. He did cough up a fumble, but still finished with 23 fantasy points. Big day for him there. And then Tyreek Hill was a monster too. He was the only person on Miami really getting anything going. He had 9 catches, 146 yards, and a touchdown. Wasn't good enough as they fell short to San Francisco, but it was plenty good enough for Al's fantasy team here. So, again, 136.64 to Matt's 100.98. There you go. And that is it for the bagpipes. No, it's not. I lied. Keep going, boys. Keep going. Colin smacked these shit out of Case. Kind of a surprise there. Colin's 147.26 to Casey's 109.6. You don't see Casey lose very often, and you don't see him get his ass kicked very often, but it did happen this week. Nick Chubb. I can't believe it. I almost put my entire bank account on Nick Chubb to have at least 2 touchdowns in this game. Didn't even get one. He finished with just 80 yards and 8 points and 8 fantasy points this week against one of the worst rush defenses in the league. It's crazy that happened, but that's fantasy football in a nutshell there. Jalen Waddle, who I did predict. I thought Miami was going to lose this game, and they sure did. And Waddle could only muster up a catch for 9 yards, just 1.9 fantasy points. It was the Tyreek Hill show this week. Michael Pittman. He got Trayvon Diggs coverage all game long. They shut him down. 2 catches, 16 yards, and 3.6 fantasy points. Tampa Bay's defense could only muster up 5. Dalton Schultz, who I traded to Case, I guess didn't get much. He didn't get the much better end of the deal this week, as he caught just 2 catches for 33 yards. In a game where Dallas scored 54 points, it was mainly their defense forcing all the turnovers and the scores, really. It got a little bit better with Najee Harris. Didn't get in the end zone, but finished with 86 yards, 10.2 fantasy points. Stephon Diggs had a good, solid, just pretty standard Diggs day. 7 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown in that win against New England. Good road win there for the Bills, 22.2 fantasy points. And then it's tough to get your ass kicked when your quarterback puts up 43.4, and that's exactly what Jalen Hurts did. He tore up Tennessee, beat them 35-10, had 380 yards and 4 total touchdowns. It was just a huge day for Hurts, but unfortunately it didn't mean diddly shit for Case. Moving on to Colin, who had a way, way better day than Case did. Despite having just a couple bummers in his team, Will Dissly had 2 catches for 22 yards, 4.2 fantasy points. The New York Jets defense didn't get to force any turnovers against Minnesota, finished with just 4.0. But other than that, it was pretty good in every other case. So Latavius Murray, in that terrible Broncos game, he still finished with 10.1. He's very much now the lead back in that team now that Captain Fumble is gone. I can't even remember his fucking name right now. Melvin Gordon. That's how little I fucking care about Melvin Gordon. Trevor Lawrence got murdered by Detroit. I expected more from Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence in this game, who put up reasonable numbers despite that horrible scoreline. He had 180 yards and a touchdown, 17.36. But like I said, Jacksonville got just decimated, 14-40 by Detroit. Saquon Barkley found the end zone once again, finished with 19.1. Christian Watson has been probably the pickup of the year, especially on Colin's part there. He had 3 catches, 48 yards, 2 touchdowns, 25.4. In the first 6 games of the season, 7 games of the season, 8 games of the season, well, he missed 2 of them, but In the first 8 games of the season, Christian Watson had zero touchdowns, and in the 6 that he's played, 0 touchdowns. And then in the last 4 that he's been a part of, he's caught 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. It's absolutely astonishing. So it's been like I said, it's been the pickup of the year for Colin with Christian Watson. Greg Zuerlein, the Jets kicker, finished with 20 points. He went 5 for 5 from field goal range and kicked an extra point. It was a huge day for him. And then Chris Olave finished with 10.5. That game was terrible, but Olave got the volume to have a double-digit day. And then finally, it was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Huge day for him. It was a day that he needed and that Colin needed for sure. He had 11 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns, 36.6 fantasy points. So it was a rare bad day for Case and just a really good, much-needed win for Colin as we inch closer and closer to the playoffs. Being able to beat Case right now is not something that a lot of people can say, as Case has gotten just his 3rd loss of the campaign. Okay, now we can stop the bagpipes. That was it.
All you've got to. Or if you have a paper who's down, it's all right, he's just missed. We have a paper down. I repeat, a paper is down.
Now, there were only 2 people this week that lost and that were left with their dignity and respect, and one of those people were Vic, I haven't been able to say that a lot about him this week, but Vic did lose to Matt Morelli, 133.64 to 142.06. It's one of those high-scoring battles that you love to see, unless you're Vic, who put up 134 points and lost. Now, Jamal Williams continues to be the most efficient running back in football. He keeps getting these tiny little workloads, but he's so efficient about getting into the end zone. He had 35 yards and a score. That's only good for 9.5, which kind of sucks, but you like to see the touchdowns. Both Isaiah McKenzie and Mark Andrews finished with just 9.4. Both of those guys kind of failed to make a huge impact in their games. McKenzie against the Pats and Mark Andrews against the Broncos. That Buffalo defense, despite winning 24-10, didn't get to force any turnovers and finished with just 7 points. Allen Lazard had 5 catches for 67 yards. He keeps losing out on all his touchdown opportunities to Christian Watson, who's come in and just been insane. Lazard finished with just 11.7. Ezekiel Elliott very much played the backup role in this game against Indianapolis and let Tony Pollard kind of just take the majority of the work. But he still got 18 points, 77 yards and a touchdown, and caught a few passes. So not a terrible day for him there. Terry McLaurin continues to be one of the best wide receivers in the league that doesn't play on a good team. He's probably like the best wide receiver in like that next tier down after all the studs. He's probably in like that B tier. McLaurin had 8 catches, 105 yards, and a touchdown, good for 26.5. And then finally, Joe Burrow had a great game against Kansas City. Cincinnati looked good. Joe Burrow looked good. 286 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Chiefs, who and Cincinnati has their number. Other than that game, they lost before they went to the. No, you know what? No, they went to the. They beat the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl, so they've won their last 5 games against Kansas City. So yeah, God, if Burrow if he could have Burrow play Kansas City every game, Vic would be in better shape than he is now. But all that being said, it wasn't good enough to beat Matt Morelli, who finally exploded for some points this week. Matt's has the lowest points for in the league, but got a huge 142.06 this week, thanks to guys like Justin Fields, who had 254 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Or I'm sorry, just 1 rushing touchdown, threw 2 picks though, but still it was good for 22.26. A.J. Brown, as expected, was just a monster against Tennessee, that horrible secondary. 8 catches, 119 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was good for just under 35 fantasy points. Brandon McManus went 3 for 4, kicked 13 points worth of, kicked enough for 13 fantasy points. But God, the story of Matt's team was the Cleveland defense. Holy shit. They had 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, 2 fumble recoveries, and 12 points allowed. That was good for 36 fucking fantasy points out of your defense. I don't know. I have never seen a defense score that many fantasy points before. Ben stuck at like a 20 something on me. That Dallas defense has gotten like 24, 25. I've never seen a 36 before. So kudos to Matt for having faith in that Cleveland defense. You very much earned it. 36 fantasy points. That's crazy. Yeah, there's just a few duds here, just worth mentioning. Kyren Williams, one of the running backs for the Rams, had played no part in this game. He had 9 yards. Cam Akers surprisingly did all the work here, and Kyren just left with 0.9 fantasy points. Dawson Knox once again. Oh no, I talked about it on Thursday for the pod because it was during the game. Yeah, he got 0 points. Already went over that. Nothing really to mention there. Juju Smith-Schuster in a high scoring game, he didn't really play much of a part. Cincinnati's defense has been respectable, and they kept Juju in check. He had 3 catches, 35 yards, and just 6.5 fantasy points. And I think that was it. And I missed Miles Sanders. He had 24 yards and a touchdown. That was always going to be a tough one for him against a pretty stout Tennessee rush defense, but he did manage to punch in and chip in with 11.8. I'm sure Matt was happy about that. So, thanks to that just ungodly showing from Cleveland's defense and AJ Brown, it was a much needed win for Matt who got the win over Vic. And finally, we have we kind of have the grand finale here in one of the closer finishes we've seen all year, and that was M's win over Abby with a final score of 103.32 to Abby's 102.32. We'll go ahead and start with M here, who had some decent showings. It was it's a really low scoring week for both of them, but M had some decent showings. Josh Allen was good and solid, 20.92 fantasy points, 223 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wasn't wasn't a massive game for him, but it was a good and efficient one. No turnovers. And good and solid for Josh Allen there. Garrett Wilson had a huge day against Minnesota. God, he's so good. He's so good. He's making a case for himself to be offensive rookie of the year. And he might get it if he keeps having weeks like this. 8 catches, 162 yards. All he did was the only thing he didn't do, rather, was just not score, but it was good for 26.2 fantasy points. M has definitely benefited in the trade that got her Michael Gallup. He is far and away wide receiver number 2 in that offense now. He's kind of come back to life after returning from his injury. 4 catches, 23 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Just a good and efficient week there. Cole Kmet was good. He was probably the main benefactor of that of Darnell Mooney being out. And I really thought it was going to be Claypool, but it was Cole Kmet, 6 catches and 72 yards, 13.2 fantasy points. Let's see if it's going to be like that going forward. Atlanta's defense struggled. They allowed 19 points, no turnovers. That was just -1. That seems kind of harsh scoring wise, but what are you going to do? Travis Etienne was not as efficient as I thought he'd be. 54 yards and a fumble, 7.6. Kareem Hunt was okay, 9.4. That's probably his ceiling, around his ceiling, what you expect for him. Not bad for him, who was out without Mixon this week. Thielen, 2 catches for 27 yards. It was more of a JJ day, unfortunately for her. But overall, got the job done. 103. That usually isn't good enough to get you the win, but against Abby's 102, it got just a point. Just a point. And I'm sure that was in there somewhere for sure for Abby. Amari Cooper, 4 catches for 40 yards, 8 points. On the road against a tough Houston secondary, that's not too bad there. Zay Jones in Jacksonville finished with just 3.6, 2 catches for 16 yards. That Rams defense against Seattle, they hung in there. That was always going to be a tough matchup for them, though, against a pretty high-powered Seattle offense. That did beat them right as the game ended. So maybe that extra point was in there. They did force an interception and a fumble. but did allow 27 points and finished with just 7. Dameon Pierce was another one who I had bigger hopes for of a big day, and just they didn't get in the end zone on the ground. Dameon Pierce, 73 yards, 12.5. It's not bad, but Cleveland's defense, rush defense rather, has been getting chewed up all year, and I really expected more there. Pat Freiermuth was okay. He had 3 catches, 76 yards, 10.6. That's kind of a textbook Freiermuth day, honestly. T. Higgins was decent. He had 3 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown. I was curious how that was going to look with Jamar Chase coming back, but Higgins still played his part and got in the end zone, as did Dalvin Cook. 86 yards and a touchdown for 16.3. That's a good day for him against a pretty good Jets rush defense. And then Patrick Mahomes was good. He had 223 yards and 2 touchdowns. I know 20 points for Mahomes seems like a bad day, and maybe it is, but for in the grand scheme of things, it's not too bad. But God, it's just tough for Abby, who just needed to find 1 point somewhere to get a tie out of him, and I'm sure it was in there somewhere. But that's just kind of fantasy football is a fickle bitch, and I've been on that side of things. I think earlier in the season I lost to Abby by like less than a point. I think it was like by like 0.58 or something like that. I think that's been scarred and burned into my brain somewhere. So, you know what, Abby? I don't feel that bad for you now that I think about it. That's not true. I feel for anybody that loses by a fucking point. So those are the matchups that wrapped up week 13. Now we are just 1 week away from the official start of the playoffs. Week 14 will be the last week of the regular season. And as I like to do, I want to just I like to update you guys with the standings. So let's just get into that here real quick before we go. At number 1 still, despite the loss, is Case. Number 2 is Al, followed by M at 3, Ben at 4, Abby in 5th, Sam at 6, Colin 7th, Liv 8th. Somehow I am still in 9th. Matt Glassmeyer in 10th, Matt Morelli in 11th, and bringing up the rear is Vic. And now, because records are so close, the seeding will come down to tiebreakers. If we still have a lot of the same records and people share the same records, as I imagine we will at the end of this week. So let me just go ahead and remind you of the points for and points against standing, because those are the two. Points for is the tiebreaker, and then if it comes down to it, points against are taken into account. Points for, leading the charge is Al, followed by Ben at number 2. Case has dropped just a little bit to number 3. Emma's in 4th, followed by Abby, Sam at 6, Colin, Liv, me, Vic, Matt Glassmeyer in 11th, and Matt Morelli in 12th. And again, that is points for. And for points against, I have overtaken Vic as the league's jizz rag, and I am number 1 in points against, followed by Vic, then Liv in 3, Ben at 4, Sam at 5, Matt Morelli in 6, Abby 7th, Matt Glassmeyer in 8th, Colin 9th, Al 10th, M 11th, and Case 12th. So there you go. Like I said, that'll only matter. Points against will only matter if there happens to be someone with the same record and same points for. But like I said, points for is the general tiebreaker if for seeding if it comes down to people having the same records, which is very much the case this year. So that will do it. I know this is kind of a short one this week. I'm trying to keep it kind of short and sweet as I kind of hit you with over an hour podcast on Thursday. I will be getting back to, it'll be an email on Thursday and going forward as long as I'm able to do the email. I do have some fun Christmas kind of stuff planned as we have a couple more weeks before then, so I'll just be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope this was just kind of a quick and easy listen to this week. I'll go ahead and bust this out real quick, lickety split, get it to you guys, and I will be back with you on Thursday in the form of eye rape instead of ear rape as it has been lately. So enjoy the rest of your night. I'll be back with you on Thursday. Thanks for listening. Peace.